Well, let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Priya Bhutani. The goal for today's discussion is to give you all an overview of some of the key things that Anvisa is prioritizing for 2019. These new changes will impact both medical device and in vitro diagnostic companies. For those of you who may not be familiar with RegDesk, we are a machine learning platform for regulatory that makes global compliance easier and faster. RegDesk is a trusted regulatory intelligence platform for many of the leading medtech companies. We're happy to discuss offline how medical device companies are using AI and regulatory to get and stay ahead. With us today, we have a leading expert from Brazil, Marcelo Antunes. Mr. Antunes has almost 2 decades of experience in the medical device regulatory field. For the past 12 years, he has been a regulatory strategy consultant at a leading consulting firm in Sao Paulo. He's currently a professor of medical device regulatory affairs at Instituto Racine and Instituto Nacional de Telecomunicações. Not only does Mr. Antunes demonstrate expertise with Brazil's regulatory affairs, but he also has expansive working knowledge of international regulatory systems, standards, and also working with EU Commission and on those of the IEC and ISO standards. His regulatory affairs consulting experience is quite extensive and covers most aspects of device lifecycle. That includes quality systems, risk management, software and product safety, product lifecycle testing, management, quality, regulatory audits, and actually also the main thing, regulatory preparation of regulatory documentation for all risk classes. Before we begin our discussion, and we have a lot to cover today, I'd like to turn our attention to our attendees. Thank you so much for joining us. At the end of this meeting, we'll be holding a brief Q&A. We encourage your participation, so please refer to the chat button on your screen. In the interest of time, please submit your questions throughout the course of our talk, and we'll try our best to address as many of your questions as we can. And if we are unable to, we'll certainly respond to you via email. Also, we'd like to get your feedback on today's webinar and also ideas on what you'd like to hear for future webinar topics. And for that, we'll send a short survey post the webinar. So, Mr. Antunes, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you today. I know we have a lot to cover and 30 minutes may seem very short, but welcome. And let's start with what types of changes can we expect this year from Anvisa?
Hello, thank you, Priya. Thank you for all the attendees. Anvisa has been a change in their regulation for some time now, mainly due to one of the things is that the international participation in IMDRF discussions and others at the international level is making Anvisa aware that they need to change some of their regulations to better reflect international requirements. I usually say, and this is the case right now, we have 2 types of changes that we are going to talk and Anvisa is doing right now. One are structural changes, most related to submission and things like that. And the other types are the specific changes that are more related to specific parts of the device or specific regulations.
Got it. So for the sake of this discussion, we will structure, so there are 2 categories where bucketing the regulations. One is what we are calling structural change and then some specific changes. So let's talk about the structural change first.
Exactly.
What's changing there?
Yeah, 3 weeks ago, Anvisa noticed that we're going to have an option, sorry, not an option, it would be the preferred path to answer what we call technical demands, which is non-conformities during the submissions, electronically. So people had to do it physically before, but now Anvisa opened this option to do it electronic. Last week, it was even better. Anvisa noticed that from yesterday, the 26th, all secondary petitions would be changes or alterations or some of the things that are not related specifically to primary device registrations, they would be done electronically. Mm-hmm. So since yesterday, all secondary petitions can be done electronically, right? And the best part, in fact, is until the middle of the year, even the primary petitions will be performed electronically. So all petitions for devices until the middle of the year will be performed electronically only.
Okay, so right now, the Anvisa is giving everyone time to, or flexibility to submit physically an application and petitions, but by mid-year, they haven't really specified a time, if we understand correctly, right? Okay.
Yeah, they didn't specify the time, but the idea is it will only be an electronic petition system. That we in the future there we will not accept physical documentation anymore.
Got it. Right. So it's Anvisa, this is a big change because they're moving away from physical documentation to electronic portal. And now this electronic portal, will the format be the same, or with this e-portal, is Anvisa changing the format of their application?
No, it's basically the same. They're just turning them electronically.
Okay, got it. And do we know more about this? So for instance, in the US, you know, there are 2 stages, but there's no, Anvisa hasn't defined various stages of approval within the electronic system, have they?
No, they didn't. In fact, they have an approval pathway, which is independently of being electronic or not. But they didn't say anything specifically about this electronic one. So we'll probably have more information because this is really new, right, from last week. We'll probably have more information, including probably some check marks on the electronic pathway. They, for example, they right now, they may include some information on where the submission is. As you may know, we can, for some years now, we can see when the petition is being evaluated by Anvisa. They constantly update this, but this is just an Excel sheet, let's say, that they put online, so we have an idea. But with an electronic system, they can do whatever they want. In fact, yeah, they can just have highlights on whatever they want. But it seems to me that they still are not thinking about that. They are really trying to push the electronic first, and then discuss the nuances of the electronic system.
Yeah, makes sense, because then they'll have a nice tracking feature, hopefully one day, where everyone can track. And then what about our additional information requests? So if Anvisa is requesting manufacturers with the applications, are those, everything is being submitted right through the e-portal?
Yeah, through the e-portal. I think it's important.
And only.
Yeah, just a comment. I think it's important to highlight that it's related to most of this. It's related to Anvisa international discussions, because this is one of the previous steps that you had to do to have electronic submission. For example, following the MDSAP work on regulated electronic submission. So this enables that in the future people can have electronic submission for different systems.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds good. And this would be for all product classifications, including everything within the device space, including IVDs.
Including IVDs.
Okay, understood. So moving on, I know there's a lot to discuss on the specific changes, which is our other category we're going to discuss. And within that, as you and I discussed earlier, there are quite a bit of changes, and those changes are not necessarily new. Some of them were discussed or brought or came to attention last year. However, now it's become a priority for Anvisa to implement and work on those topics more in 2019. So can you provide a list of some of those specific changes that Anvisa is focused on for 2019?
Sure. Well, the five ones I'm going to talk about are: first is the reprocessing of devices. Second is software as medical devices regulation. The third one is the proposal for notification for Class 1 devices. Then we have the custom devices proposal, and then the discussion on used and refurbished devices.
Okay, so we have software as a medical device. There's a new guidance document coming for that category. There are talks and proposal about Class 1 devices will now just require notification. Then they're discussing guidances on products that are refurbished and ones that are reprocessed, and then also custom-made devices. Can you talk a little bit more specifically? Let's discuss perhaps the Class 1 notification, because that's huge.
Yeah, and I just have a confirmation from the directors of Anvisa had a meeting yesterday. It was going to be last week, but in fact was transferred to yesterday, and it's already approved. In fact, before, but it had a previous public consultation last year. So from yesterday, it was approved to go into publication. So if everything goes well, in a few weeks, probably, and again, it really depends on how Anvisa is going to do that. They take some weeks to publish things, but probably in a few weeks or in 1 or 2 months or something, all Class 1 devices will come under the notification regime. They will be out of Cadastro and Registro. They only need to be notified that they will Anvisa.
So that's great. So then what happens to the devices that fall under Cadastro? Are they eliminating Cadastro then?
No, Cadastro will still be applicable to Class 2 devices.
Okay. So that's huge. So that's moving forward. And how does Anvisa implement this? So the minute, let's say next week, Friday, if the publication, they publish this, then basically starting the time when it's issued and published is the time when foreign manufacturers can start implementing the new process. Is that right?
Yeah, we really need to wait for the publication, because the publication can or cannot have a transition period. If you got the last experience, they probably won't have a transition period, and every Class 1 device will be automatically changed for notification. The only problem with that is that the notification, at least it was the planning when I discussed this with Anvisa last year. It does require numbers, so manufacturers will need to ask for a number for Anvisa, and they will need to send the number. That's only the process won't be that in principle, right? Mm-hmm. So, but again, we have to wait for the final publication. But if it goes as planned this way, manufacturers will probably have a time, again, so all devices will be Class 1, and manufacturers will probably have a time to require this number to Anvisa. And that's what they will need to do to put the Class 1 devices in the market.
And so that should free up the reviewer's time for Class 2 and Class 3.
The thing that Anvisa has been constantly focused on more risk classes.
Yeah, so they're trying to focus more on higher risk classes, and that because one of the complaints from the industry is the time it takes to get products approved in Brazil. It's longer than some of the other markets. Okay, so that's big, and so we should all watch out for this change. And at RegDesk, we'll be happy to notify everyone once this goes into publication. Now, can you talk about software as a medical device regulation? So is it a new guidance altogether? How was it done prior to this new publication?
Yeah. And just make it clear, all these topics are not guidance, they are regulations, so they are mandatory. Okay. Right now we have a guidance. In fact, we have a guidance for software, which was created based on the MedDev guidance from the EU, right? But software is regulated like the other ones, Cadastro and Registro, the common pathways, okay? What this regulation is gonna do is to create a specific way to register software as medical devices. Following national discussions, in particular the IMDRF discussions on software as medical devices, which we created the terms. I participated in the group representing Brazilian industry together with Anvisa, and they are really getting this information and other best practices to create a specific regulation in Brazil. Okay. So the idea is this will be a new pathway.
And so this is a regulation and essentially following IMDRF process. Yeah. So if clients are, which many of them would be familiar with it, then this will be fairly simple way process. Yeah. Okay.
Well, it is also based on international standards, such as IEC 83304 and 62304, which are the software standards. So basically, if you are familiar with how software as medical devices are being discussed internationally in regulations, including international, okay, understanding what Anvisa wants.
Okay. And do we know when this will get published?
No, we don't have a time frame yet, but the thing is, it was in the beginning of last year, it was a priority to Anvisa, but some priorities began being getting more priority. But it seems now that it's really that it's going to be published this year. This is the objective.
The objective is this year. So, but we don't know if it's going to be in a couple months or later this year, but so we should all keep an eye.
From my information, and because in particular our group of standards for software in Brazil, they participate in the discussion by revising the documentation from Anvisa. We probably have a meeting 2 months from now, so they'll a little more short, 3 months after that, Anvisa may publish a public consultation. So with the current open information.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then moving on to some of the other specific ones, custom devices. So can you talk a little bit about custom devices and also about some of the privacy laws that many clients have to consider with custom devices? Are there any specific privacy laws that, with patient privacy laws that foreign manufacturers should consider? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is mostly touched upon on the proposal regulation, because we do have generic data protection regulations, including some related to patients, but they are not published by Anvisa. They are published by the health minister or the health or the management authority of the presidency. So they are general, but they do have to be in conformed with. So anyone that worked with privacy information has to conform with the regulation in Brazil related to that. Besides, in the case of custom-made devices, being in conformity with the custom devices regulations also. Just a reminder, when you talk about custom-made devices, other name that we have for that is personalized devices. In fact, this is the title of the IMDRF working group dealing with this discussion. And the good thing is that this proposal, which was published last year, it was already based on the IMDRF discussion. So links with the international discussions.
So yeah, so it's being titled personalized devices rather than custom-made devices. Okay, so it's
our name is custom, but the MDRFs call it personalized.
Yeah, okay, understood. And then anything that you want to highlight regarding the used devices and the ones that are refurbished, and then also the ones regarding single-use or reusable medical devices, so the reprocessing of it. What's so different about the new regs compared to what currently exists?
Yeah, these are 2 different topics, just to make it clear. The reprocessing one, we have a public consultation right now. It's still open, so manufacturers have until, I think it's 8th of March, to make comments. And it's really a totally overhaul of the current regulations that we have. And Anvisa created a small group, a delegated group some 3 years ago that has been discussing reprocessing and a lot of different topics related to reprocessing, including international requirement, standards, and expectations. So this will be a real overhaul of regulatory reprocessing requirements, right? So the thing is, as it's still open, Anvisa will get some time to deal with the comments. So this is also probably going up on the end of the year, more or less, due to current information. That's what I would say.
Sure. And so that this is a notification. So clients, I know they always ask us to notify them of any publications or guidances or laws, regulations that are out there where the industry, where the ministry, the agencies open for feedback, and there's a timeline. So that timeline's approaching. Up till March 8th, you can provide feedback on that the regulation. So this is the opportunity to provide feedback to Anvisa.
Yeah.
So point noted on that. Now moving on, can we, so just want to highlight again that all these changes are affecting IVD companies as well. So this is not just specific to devices, but clearly software, IVDs, everything within the umbrella.
Yes, it's all applicable to IVDs too.
Got it. And then is Anvisa going to revise fees along with the noted changes?
No, there's no expectation to that. This is a discussion that it's done at the government level, not at Anvisa level, because this Ministry of Management, well, we have a specific name, I don't remember right now, but it's not Anvisa who defines fees, so it's more difficult to discuss that. The thing is, for some of those, they will probably have a new fees because of the new type of readiness. For example, the custom-made devices, you probably need a new type of fee depending on how it's implemented in the end. But there's no expectation of changes of any current fees right now.
Okay. So what can foreign manufacturers do to prepare for all these changes that we discussed?
Yeah, okay, it's a good question, and it really goes back to what you said. And unfortunately, most of those are, 3 of those are already after the public consultation, but the best thing manufacturers have to do is to participate on those consultations, because they are really the opportunity for manufacturers to discuss and comment on any of these proposed changes, right? The second thing that I always think in Brazil is good, because we have a problem with, a lot of countries have problem with sharing information, even on Anvisa. So it's very important to participate in associations, either the importers or the Brazilian manufacturer associations. Really, most of these discussions is really begin to be done during associations meetings together with Anvisa, and then they go to Anvisa. So it's a very good opportunity to discuss these things, even into Anvisa writing something, or after the public consultation is published, to discuss with your peers also how to do comments as an association. After that, the only thing that you have to take care is really to look at trends, right? So some of these has been trends for years. This 5 that I said, there's been trends for years. So it either will go into a discussion this year or one of the other years. It really depends on the Anvisa priorities. Right now, Anvisa has what they call the regulatory agenda, which has several topics that are priorities to them. And this is one of the ways to understand where regulations are going. Obviously, we can also have specific regulations that are put in addition to there, but the regulatory agenda really tells where Anvisa is heading related to regulations in other fields. In fact, the regulatory agenda is not for medical devices only, for all fields of Anvisa.
Mm-hmm. So within devices, is there anything else on the agenda that we may not have covered that you can just bring to everyone's attention?
Yeah, in fact, there's 5 or 6 more topics, in fact, but they are very specific. One is for blood bags, for example, which is part of medical devices. But again, it's very, very specific. I don't remember all right now, but you can just click on the Anvisa website on the regulatory agenda. You can see, well, it's not in English, in fact, unfortunately, but it's all there. There's some topics. So usually there are 10 to 15 topics at any moment for any regulatory agenda that Anvisa has.
Mm-hmm. And what's Anvisa's, how do they prioritize what comes to their attention?
Yeah, and this is a good question, because it's not very clear, let's say, for the outside, how priorities are performed, but mostly that they are demands either from the technical sector, right, such as manufacturer importance, or Anvisa itself, due to one of their needs. If you look at some of those things that we discussed, some of those are related to the need to Anvisa to lower the actions and the resources they use on low risk devices. So they are chained, in fact. If you look at 3 or 4, what we did, most of them will end up getting Anvisa more free time to focus on specific things. Mm-hmm. So some of those are related to requirements for the manufacturers or the importers or both. So most of those are related to this. They have an internal priority process, which takes everything into consideration, right? I don't remember, I don't think it's open right now. It is in some documents, but the process itself is internal. But then again, they look for demands, in fact, and most of the demands are related to manufacturer importers to Anvisa or public health or something.
Mm-hmm. Understood. I know we're approaching the end of our time, 30 minutes, but I know you have a lot of good tips. So if you wouldn't mind spending just a few minutes talking about some tips that you can give to foreign manufacturers on, and one of the issues is, right, delays with Anvisa. How are there things that companies can do to avoid delays?
Sure. Well, one of the things that even you mentioned that people thinks a lot that registration in Brazil takes a lot of time, right? This was true some years ago, right? Right now, Anvisa is really getting into, she's doing better than what the law requires, which is 90 days. They are usually answering any submission in 60 days. The main problem is that, and this is one of the tips, usually the information that goes to Anvisa is not very good. In fact, from my experience, this has always been the problem, right? Because it's very common, for example, for manufacturers, particularly from abroad, just create a document such as a technical dossier, a technical file, which is the most technical document, and just copy and paste a lot of information from documents from abroad with nothing linking or explaining things. So when it goes to Anvisa, in fact, Anvisa has to do the work that the manufacturer should do and analyze stuff, which really is not something that they'll probably like. One clear example that I mentioned to you in a previous call is, well, you have a lot of devices right now. There is a highlighted need of clinical data, right? So what Anvisa really wants is a type of clinical evaluation, like the one you do for Europe, following the MedDev. What happens is that manufacturers, instead of doing clinical evaluation, they just have got a lot of clinical investigation data and just send all this raw data without previous checking, a previous verification, or passing through a previous clinical evaluation process. Well, if they got a raw data, then we will begin to look at specific stuff that probably they will never look if the clinical evaluation had been performed. And then you have Anvisa getting a lot of non-conformities, or what you call technical demands, because of the raw information that they send. So it's obvious that you need to send raw information, usually in an annex to the submissions, but you have to have an evaluation of any information, including test reports, for example, to send on the content of the dossiers. And then you annex anything, but Anvisa in principle, as is true for more regulatory systems, they don't want to see raw data, they want to see evaluations.
Mm-hmm. That's a very valid point.
And then they can always require more data if they want to.
Sure, I think so. What you're saying is clients are doing the opposite. They're sharing a lot of raw data. They're not performing an analysis of that data and sharing the analysis, but rather just here's the data and here's a lot of data. And then they get asked questions, very specific questions on that data, because that's all that the agency has to focus on.
Exactly. That's what they, so they have to ask questions for that. If you send the analysis, you probably look at the analysis instead of the raw data.
Mm-hmm. And what about, just very quickly, the GMP, the audit and the inspection, any tips on that end? Because I know that also plays a big role in the approval process.
Yeah, and that's what takes time. It's not the approval itself, but the things that you should do before the approval. Mm-hmm. Mainly GMP requirements and in-metro certification. This can take some time. Unfortunately, although Anvisa has been lowered the time, in particular due to the MDSAP program, right? We are still some 3 years waiting for the Anvisa inspection. So really the best way to go to Brazil, if it makes sense to the manufacturer, is to go the MDSAP route, because when you have an MDSAP report from an auditing organization that Anvisa recognize, when you ask for the certification and when Anvisa is going to plan their inspections, they will check if they have a valid report for your manufacturing plant. If so, they will evaluate, and if it's okay, they will simply give the certificate instead of coming there, of waiting 3 years to go there.
That's a very good tip. Well, thank you so much. We've, I know, gone 2 minutes over. These are usually 30 minutes. Thank you very much. I'm sure everyone appreciated a lot of tips, a lot of good giveaways and takeaways from today's conversation. And for the viewers, thank you so much again for your time. And we're always open for feedback, so please do not hesitate to contact us internally at RegDesk with any questions. And then I know we have received some questions, and we will definitely look into this and come back to you personally. We'll send an email and answer these questions. And if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to email us. But thank you again, everyone, for your time. And we'll look forward to seeing all our viewers again next month for another webinar.
Thank you, Priya.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.